Alright, so I basically just tidied it up a little bit, did some final little edge highlights, put a little bit of our Belton green wash down in some of the cracks just to darken it up a little bit and give us that contrast. But we're going to call it there. Looks great. I'm very happy with the model and how it came out. Definitely loving, obviously, like the posability of the different weapons and everything, the ability to, move the model around and everything, and really show off, you know, all the detail and everything of him. And I'll do some nice still shots as well. It's hard with the intensity of the color and then also the intensity of the light. And then also I don't have the best camera. So combination of all those things makes for not necessarily the best presentation. Still need to do the base on this guy, but overall he is very cool. And I'm very happy with how the model came out and also the paint job as well. So welcome back to the channel, Warhammer Man in the studio, and today we're going to be painting up our Skorpekh Lord conversion. And if you didn't see the previous video on how we made this dude, I highly recommend you check it out. My Indomitus set came all busted up and broken, so I was motivated to do some slight conversions, and I basically break it down in the other video, so I highly recommend you check it out. But this is what we're working with today. We're going to do like the traditional paint job on him, and in order to make it a little bit easier, we're going to go ahead and take him apart. So we're going to start off, obviously we base coated him gold, but we're going to use the brand new runelord brass. This is just slightly darker than the gold that we've already got on him. So alright, so we're just going to get started off with that runelord brass. Get a little bit on our dry brush here, and we're just going to kind of hit the model with it. It doesn't have to be too crazy because we are going to go through and do some washes later, but we just want to shift it over to like just a little bit different of a shade than that gold that was on there to begin with. So, and this is going to do just that. It's not going to make a huge difference, so you don't have to worry about if you miss any spots or anything like that. But overall, we're just trying to darken up the gold a little bit and get it the right tone, and then we can kind of bring it down later on with some highlights and get a little bit more of a direction with it. So we're just going to go through and basically do that all over the model. And alternatively, you could skip this step by just using the Citadel spray. Alright, now for our next step, we're going to take our Canoptekh alloy, and you'll notice it's just a little bit brighter. It has kind of like a little bit of a silver tint to it, and we're just going to take that same dry brush. I put it right on top of the old paint that we just used. It's not a big deal if they mix a little bit, and all we're going to do is just focus some dry brush highlights towards the top of the panels with this color. Areas that would be getting hit by the sun more, going to be just a little bit brighter. So we're going to do like the top piece of the leg right there, do the top piece of the leg right here, and we're just going to leave the bottom part alone and kind of just focus on like the edges and, like I said, those top portions. So all that's doing is just giving us a little bit of depth of color, and then we can go through later and kind of pick out some highlights if we want to. And you'll see we're just focusing everything towards the areas where the sun would basically be hitting it. So the top portion of each panel, or the portion that would be exposed to the light. And as we get closer towards like the actual top of the model, we're going to use just a little bit more of this because we want the whole top of the model to just be slightly brighter than the whole bottom of the model, so that it will kind of draw your attention towards where it's brightest or where it's lightest, which is going to be like his face, which is where we want all the attention to go. Even with like the bright glowing green lights and everything, we want to still make sure that we're drawing everybody's attention to it. And now in this, you'll notice that we're just doing like the top half of the gun. We're basically just avoiding the bottom half of the gun. Again, that's just so that we're just brightening up the top portion and kind of leaving the bottom portion alone, so it's going to give just a little bit more depth. And you'll see I'm not being like very specific or anything like that. I'm just focusing on certain areas that would like catch the light or catch my eye. Give us our basic look for him, and then after we wash it, we're going to come back with that and use that as like an edge highlighting color, and that's going to really lighten him up. So, and you can do as much as you like. You may want to keep him like a little bit darker for like a grim dark look, or you may want to do him a little bit lighter if you like the brighter colors. It's 100% entirely up to you. And then finally, I'm just going to do the same thing on this portion of his little like dangly bit, and I'm going to leave the bottom alone. And then again, as we wash it, the wash is going to go down towards the bottom, and it's going to darken that area up for us again. Alright, so next we have our contrast basilicanum gray. We're going to go through and just paint like all the little like joint areas and everything on this. So there's quite a few of them that we're going to do. Basically just looking for like the little elbow joints and stuff. These also flow really well down into the cracks, which is another nice thing about them. They're ready to go like right out of the pot. We're going to see there's just like a little bit of like the metallics kind of poking through, and that's going to get taken care of with our Dark Reaper. We're just going to do a little bit of a dry brush. We try to be as careful as possible not to get it on the metallics, but if we make a little mistake, we're just going to clean it up and then we'll come back through with a highlight. And all we're going to do is whichever pieces we're working on, we're just going to do like a nice little light dry brush over top of it, and that Dark Reaper is just going to give it like a little bit of like a sort of like a blue tint to the dry brush highlights. So, okay, so now that we have our basic colors laid down, and we essentially did like the highlight over the basilicanum gray or black, whatever, we're going to do afterwards some edge highlights on that dry brush we just did. But first what we want to do is there's a couple spots where we had gotten like a little bit of like paint over top. We just want to go through and just kind of touch that up right now with the Canoptekh alloy. And then once we get those little spots touched up right there, we're going to go ahead and wash it with the Cryptek armourshade. And we're going to mostly focus on the gold itself, but if we get some onto the black, it's not a big deal as well. So, but we are going to go ahead and wash the black with Nuln Oil also. Alright, great. So now that he's dry pretty well, we're going to go ahead and do our shade. And this is the Cryptek armourshade gloss. This is a new one. It's a little bit darker than what I was expecting, honestly, but I've seen it used a few times already and it looked pretty good. So, and again, we're going to be going through and doing Nuln Oil next. So if we get just a little bit of this onto like the blue or black or whatever, it's not a big deal at all, because we're going to be going back through, and the darker color obviously will override it. Just going to start at the bottom and kind of see how that looks. It's got a nice look to it. It's definitely dark, but that's just going to make, when we come through with our highlights next, our edge highlights, that's really going to make this stand out. Alright, so we got the Cryptek armourshade gloss on there. We're going to do our Nuln Oil over the black. We just want to put on like liberal amount of this. We're just looking to darken everything up a little bit, and then when we brighten it up later, that's going to make like the glow effect and everything stand out even more, the darker like the overall model is. It's all about like the contrast between the light and dark. That's what makes it really look like it's glowing. And you'll see that when this is done, it's going to kind of settle down, and it's just going to leave a little bit of like that grayish blue shining through, especially on like the top areas of where we're applying this Nuln Oil to. And then we can go back through afterwards with the highlight, and we can really get like the full effect that we're looking for. And I'm trying to stay away from the areas we already did, like the gold. But if there's a little bit that gets on like the transition or whatever, it's not a big deal. And then also like the, edge highlights a lot of times will cover up any little bits like that. But that's why we did our little touch-ups before we did the wash. That way our touch-ups have the correct like tone to them also. Nice and blended in correctly. Just do a little once over everything. Make sure we got what we need. Definitely starting to take shape now. I think a couple highlights are really going to make them stand out. So, alright, so here's our bro now that the washes have dried. And it's definitely a little bit on the darker side from what I was expecting. The Cryptek armourshade gloss is definitely dark. It's not a problem though, as long as you're expecting it. You could probably take it down a notch if you wanted to, just by thinning it a little bit, or potentially using like Reichland Flesh Shade or something like that. But overall, it still looks good. All I want to do now is just kind of lighten him back up a little bit. So I'm going to take that Runelord brass again, and I'm just going to get a little bit on here, and I'm just going to go through and just kind of pick out a little bit of like the raised up areas, and just kind of lighten them up a little bit. And that should give us a little bit more like what we were expecting. And then we can just go through and do like one little edge highlight again, with the Canoptekh alloy. But yeah, I'm just gonna go through and like lighten up like all these areas that are basically like exposed to the top. Kind of do like a zenithal kind of like a highlight. Oh yeah, it's already starting to bring it back a little bit more towards what I was expecting or what I was looking for. But I mean, it's all good. That's why you want to typically start with one model, get like your little paint scheme, color combination, technique down, and then just like batch paint after that. You don't want to just jump right in on the first guy and like, or jump right in on everybody without like testing a paint like what I did here. On a whole army, and then end up having to do like extra steps because you didn't just try it first. But I mean, if you just got one guy like this and you got to do a couple extra steps, it's not a big deal. But if it was a whole army, I might be a little salty. I'm gonna take his arms off here in a minute. Get in there a little bit better. Starting to look a little more like the shade I was looking for in here now. Really liking these new models and how they're like have like broken and worn spots throughout, like battle damage and everything. That's awesome. You can really see it once you start painting them. And again, I'm going to just focus the highlights here towards the top and just kind of taper them off as I get towards the bottom. So I'm going to start off by painting the whole panel. Then I'm going to do a little less on the next one, a little less on the next one. And now same thing, I'm focusing the highlights towards like the top of the panels and the edges. So I did like only the top of this panel. Now I'm going to go down to the edge and I'm going to just do like a little edge highlight on it. And that'll make it stand out and you'll be able to see like a little more clearly like the differentiation between them. And then I want to lighten up like the entire top surface because that would be getting exposed to like the most light. And I'm just lightening these up a little more than I would normally light up like the lighten up the feet on a model because they're like sticking out in front, so they would be like getting hit by that sunlight or by that, you know, whatever our main light source is. And then I'm probably gonna do like a little bit of I might do OSL. I haven't decided yet. We'll see when we get there. I'm definitely gonna do the weapon up cool, but I may do a little OSL glow as well. And we just want to make sure while we're doing this that although we're covering up some of the washed areas, we want to make sure we don't just undo all the work we did and just paint the whole model this color again. Looking pretty good now. A little bit on the black there. I actually ended up switching the head on this dude too. I think I used the one from the murder bucket, the crypto thrall, just because it looked cooler than the standard one. Kind of like that one eye. I mean, I do like that one eye, not even kind of. Well, if that ain't it, we're close. I normally wouldn't even do like edge highlights on the bottom, but because this guy's magnetized and posable, there's like poses where his arms will be up in the air. So I want it to be, I don't want it to be like unpainted on the bottom and then you see it when he like flips it up. Oh yeah, he's starting to look nice now. That definitely helped brightening it up like that. That was definitely the way to do it. Because that wash is so dark. I mean, you could almost get away with like a little Larmium medium, thin it down, and then cut this step down so much. Just by having it not be as dark, you wouldn't have to do nearly as much of this. But I think I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in. We're just going to go right back to the Canoptekh alloy. And we're just going to lighten them up a little bit. And we're just going to do the same thing, just kind of focus this one a little bit more towards the edges. And do like an edge highlight. And you may notice too that I always use like an old junk brush or something like that to get my paint out of my jars. The reason I do that is just so my brush isn't like overly like crazy like saturated, covered in paint, especially when I'm doing dry brush. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of like a mix, get just a little water in there, and it's just going to be like about a 50-50 mix between these two, the Cryptek, or I'm sorry, the runelord brass and the Canoptekh alloy. And then I'm going to go pure alloy towards the end. But I'm not going to use any of the super bright alloy on the... I'm going to do like a 50-50 mix now between the two. And then I'm going to do Canoptekh alloy at the end. And I'm only going to use Canoptekh alloy basically on the top half of the model. Or like exposed areas that would be picking up like the absolute most light. Because I don't want it to be like overly bright to where it takes away from the whole model's kind of detail. And again, we're trying to get that kind of like darker look contrast with this guy, so that the OSL appears like even brighter, or like just the glowing weapon, not even necessarily OSL. But so yeah, we're just going through and just picking out like the absolute parts that would be the most bright. And you'll see how they just kind of layer on top of each other. And it just takes it a little bit lighter each time. Takes it to the next level. And you don't have to do like the mix, but I find that typically if you mix between colors, you're going to get a much smoother blend. And it's going to be like less evident when somebody looks at it. Versus if you just go from like one color to the next, it's going to be like a lot more clear where the transition is at. Alright, so here he is looking good. I'm just going to do one final little edge highlight with some Ironbreaker, which is just a little bit lighter than the Canoptekh alloy. And that's just going to bring out that last little bit of our lighting effect. And I'm just going to use that on just a couple spots just to brighten them up just a little bit more. Kind of make them stand out. And again, I'm going to keep it real light with this. And I'm only going to use it at the top of any panels. Yeah, it's just giving me that extra little bit of brightness that I want. Alright, so we got the metallics all done now. We're going to go through and we use that Dark Reaper, and we're just going to do a little bit of highlights on black or gray, and kind of pick out some of the areas as well, the same way we did with that with the metallics. So we're just going to kind of focus on towards the top, sort of like a little bit of a zenithal deal going on. So you want obviously like the top part of whatever you're painting that's going to be hit with the most light to be the brightest, and that's the idea. Essentially behind like that zenithal look, you're essentially just simulating the light source of like the sun or the sky. And then also, you know, we had like one little spot right here when you touch up. A couple of those spots where we bumped our metallic up against everything. Just want to make sure we take care of those as well while we're doing this. And I'm just again trying to focus these on the top half of like any panels or anything I'm putting them on, so it's not just going to be all over everything. want to be particularly careful about our metallics now that we've done so much on them. We don't want to have to go through and redo them. So this is when we're going to start paying attention to, you know, extra careful. And again, we're just going to focus this all on the top. Starting to really take shape. Such a cool model too, even before it was broken. I mean, this one's obviously extra cool because he's unique and everything, but very cool model. Alright, so now we're just going to, I think we pretty much got everything else done. I'm just going to focus on that gun now here in a sec. Just cleaning up a little bit of the silver that got on some of these bits. Keep in mind too, not everything has to be perfect as we're going. We just want to overall keep it nice and clean. And then we can touch up any areas that particularly like standing out. But I think sometimes people just get caught up on trying to make something too perfect and spend a bunch of extra unnecessary time for something that, you know, you may spend an extra like 2 hours on a model cleaning it up and making it perfect, and then if you took that model before you spend the 2 hours and showed it to somebody and then you took it afterwards, they probably could barely tell the difference. And you think, is it really worth it? If you do a bunch of work to something and then you can't even tell the difference. And I mean, I've done that myself before. I'll do a bunch of extra like highlighting and all this stuff and take a bunch of time and make everything perfect, and then I look at it and then I look at the model I haven't done it to yet that needs to do whatever I just did, and I think, I can't even tell the difference. You know, or not enough to be worth the amount of work you're putting into it. And because this part of the like the gun in this case is the topmost part of the model, like the highest up, I'm going to do just a little bit brighter of a highlight on the actual gun than everything else. So when I come in with like my next color, I might just do like one more little like blend, just a shade lighter on this gun right here, and like the little spines on his back, his little vertebrae. Nice. Alright, so now we're just going to do a little bit more highlighting with our Thunderhawk blue, and just kind of lighten up a couple of those little spots we just did. And we're going to focus primarily on the bits that are like not centrally located. So the areas that are like tucked away in his like torso and stuff, we're not going to do as much on. But like areas like this that are like directly exposed to light with like nothing blocking it, we're going to go just a little bit lighter on. And like when we do this, it's the same type of thing as always when we're doing our like edge highlights or dry brush or whatever. If the last, like the first basilicanum gray that we did, say that took up like, of the black it was like 100%, then the next we would do like 75%, then 50%, and now this would be like our like 10 or 20%. But it's just a little less each time, and then that's going to give like the real nice kind of like fade look, which we're going for. And it's going to really make like those areas that are not in the shadows stand out just a little bit more. And that's kind of like what like catches your eye, and makes you think like, oh man, that thing looks great, or that's awesome. So same deal, we're just going to use it a little minimally and just kind of focus it on the top parts and the edges where it would like catch the light in real life. But again, we're not going to go as deep into like his torso area, because most of that stuff is like covered up by shadows one or multiple times. Alright, so the Thunderhawk blue is done. Now we're just going to take a little bit of Celestra gray and do like a 50-50 mix, and we're just going to pick out some of the sharper highlights. And for this I'm going to use an actual detail brush, and I'm just going to water it down just ever so slightly. And then all we're going to do is just go through and pick out just like the absolute edges, like the most minor little bits, and just kind of brighten them up just a tiny bit. And this is going to be what really gives us like the contrast. And you'll see for this I've switched over to like an actual detail brush for the first time. you'll see it's really starting to pick out those edges, and it gives you like the sharp, crisp kind of like highlight, and that's what we're going for right here. And this is where we want to really keep it clean and minimal. Alright, so he's really starting to come along now. We got our edge highlights layered on all the way to just the straight Celestra gray metallic. So I'm going to use the lead belcher on this one, and then we'll just do like a real light dry brush with a lighter steel, and then maybe just a slight wash. Nothing too crazy. It's just a couple tiny little details I wanted to pick out. Probably should have done them already, but and then there's like a couple little like basically pistons that operate his legs down here. And then there's a couple right in his neck area right here we want to do as well. And then we'll maybe do like the little barrels of the gun up here. Alright, next step, we're going to take our white scar and we're going to go ahead and paint over all the areas that are going to be using like the glow effect later on. So you want to get your white and make sure it is adequately watered down. You don't want it to be like thick and chunky, leaving like streak marks or anything. And you just want to, if you have to do a couple coats, that's fine, but you just want to make sure you get like a nice smooth covering over everything. Make sure it's like watered down just a little bit if you need to, just to make sure that you're getting like smooth and good. I think white and yellow are probably the two worst colors, the most noticeably like not applied correctly, I guess you would say. Or I don't know, I see it all the time on people's stuff, and it's like chunky, it's got like streaks in it, and they could be like excellent painters, and you know, white is just difficult and they don't go through like the steps necessary. So if you got to water it down a little bit, you can keep brushing it in the same direction. That always helps too, so you're not like tearing all your paint back apart as it's drying and you're laying it down. Want to make sure you get it down in all those little cracks too for that full-on glow effect. Alright, time for the Tesseract Glow. This is that new technical, and I used it on the Palanite Enforcers, and it's absolutely beautiful. And if you don't have one of these bad boys, you should get one, because it will reduce your spilling by about 95%. It is still, however, possible, but much less likely. Alright, and you can see the white is like already glowing on its own. So all we're going to do is we're just going to apply some of this on top of the white, and we're just going to let it sink down in the recesses. That is the goal. So I want to do the weapon last because I want to leave it drying on the model actually. So we're going to start right here. And I really like the effect on this stuff, so I'm actually going to use it on these two because I picture they have like energy flowing through them and they're like full on glowing. And if you don't like it, don't paint yours like this. And if you do, by all means, and you can say it was your idea, I promise I won't mind. And this stuff is awesome. It actually behaves almost exactly like a contrast paint, but you have to be careful because it is very runny. As you can see, I used just a little bit too much. But the beauty of effects like this is, if you get just a little bit where you don't want it, it sort of just gives off like that OSL look. So it kind of looks like you just meant to do that. Alright, we are almost done with this bad boy. All I'm doing now is just layering in a little bit more of our effect, just to darken it up a little bit. So I'm going to focus on the pieces where it joins on, and then I'm going to do the opposite panels on this side. And that's going to give me like that kind of three-dimensional glow kind of look to it. But the whole thing won't look uniform, which is the key. And then over here where it connects, I'm going to darken it up, and right here, and I'm going to try to leave the edges exposed. And then here I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to turn the blade part right there a little more green, you want to make sure it's very dry, or like majority of the way dry before you start adding in other stuff. Make sure you don't like tear the paint that's already on there. But now we're starting to get like a little control with the blade. Man, it's so bright you like probably can't even make it out.